Good afternoon. This is a work session of the Government Operations Committee of the Subcommittee of the Health and Government Operations Committee. We have 3 bills to discuss today, and I will put the order in the chat. We'll begin with House Bill 627, which is a cross file of Senate Bill 331. We'll go on to House Bill 1189, cross filed with Senate Bill 801 and Senate Bill 773. So let's begin with HB 627. Lindsay, can you summarize this bill for us and tell us what the amendments do?
So this is an emergency bill that alters the membership of the West North Avenue Development Authority, also known as WNADA, and generally exempts WNADA from state procurement law. WNADA is still subject to written policy and procedure requirements for exempt units and the state's Minority Business Enterprise Program. I circulated amendments that are a combination of amendments from the sponsor and from the chair of this committee approved by the sponsor. The amendments add 2 members to the membership of WNADA appointed by the chair, alters the date WNADA must submit its comprehensive report, requires the report to include procurement activities, and requires the report to go to this HGO committee, and specifies that the procurement exemption in the bill terminates September 30th, 2026, and that is regardless of whether or not WNADA ends up extended. That is the anticipated termination date for WNADA now, but if those bills were to be extended, this procurement exemption would have to be separately extended.
Thank you.
This is a description that serves for both bills. The House bill would have to be amended identically to the Senate bill, which is the one that I circulated the reprint for.
Thank you. Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for you or Lindsay. I do not remember from either of the hearings the rationale for the different procurement process. What was that?
The sponsor of the bill and the gentleman, I forget his name, I'm sorry, from WNADA testified that they were looking to streamline the process for procurement for WNADA. They have funding in the budget right now from the state and that they are looking to try and use. And as I mentioned, the entity terminates in 3 years. So they're trying to get this work done quickly, utilize the funding that they've got in the state budget.
Is there, hate to say this Monday before, Sunny day, is there any value in studying the changed procurement to then say afterwards, wow, this streamlining thing is good. Let's do this elsewhere in state government where we do procurement. So
That's part of the report.
Just throwing it out there.
The amendments that I circulated would include a description of their procurement activities as part of their report, and that would come to HGO. So that might be an opportunity to look back at how well this worked for this entity. And I apologize, I forgot to mention that the Senate bill passed the Senate 47-0.
Anyone else before I entertain a motion on the amendment? Okay, anyone want to move the amendment?
Move the amendments.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the amendment, say aye, please.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? On the bill as amended?
Move favorable.
Second.
Motion to move favorably on the bill as amended. And a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed to this bill as amended? Okay, thank you. Lindsay, let's move on to 1189 and Senate Bill 801.
So just like the previous set of bills, House Bill 1189 is a cross file of Senate Bill 801, so would receive the same amendments. And I'll start by saying Senate Bill 801 passed the Senate 45-0. The bill establishes a Cyber Maryland program in the Maryland Technology Development Corporation, also known as TEDCO, to create a talent pipeline in cybersecurity, serve as a hub for state workforce development programs in cybersecurity, and generally coordinate cybersecurity and research and innovation in the state. The bill also creates the Cyber Maryland Fund as a special non-lapsing fund to be administered by the program. The bill establishes and specifies the membership of the Cyber Maryland Board to provide input on the strategic plan, assist the executive director of the program, and coordinate with the Department of Labor and Department of Commerce. Beginning December 1st, 2026, the program in conjunction with TEDCO must submit an annual report on the operation and performance of the program to the governor and General Assembly. The bill, as originally introduced, required the governor in fiscal 2025 to include an appropriation in the annual budget of $250,000 for the fund and also sufficient funds to cover staff for the program. The amendments that I circulated for Senate Bill 801 authorize rather than require the governor to include an appropriation of $250,000 to the fund, and specifies that the fund shall be used for the U.S. Department of Commerce talent pipeline management approach only to the extent that there is funding in the budget. Because these bills would need to be amended identically, the House bill would also need an additional amendment that was adopted in the Senate side on Senate Bill 801 that add for-profit corporations to the list of entities that are authorized to receive grant funding. The sponsor also let me know that the Senate reprint of the budget includes $690,000 in general funds for TEDCO for the purpose of the Cyber Maryland program and the 2 staff, and that is contingent on the passing of one or the other of these bills.
Delegate Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lindsay, can you give me an example where a for-profit company would need the grant?
I can't hear Delegate Johnson. I don't know if others can.
I heard the question, an example of a for-profit entity. I apologize, I'm caught off guard and I don't have a great example of that. I know that amendment was offered on the Senate side and I don't have the background discussion of if there was a particular person that they
John
were.
Fiastro is here.
Yeah, if anybody could answer that, that'd be great.
Yeah. John, do you have the answer to that question?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. John Fiastro here on behalf of Cybersecurity Association of Maryland. We're pleased to see this bill on the voting list. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your hard work in this subject area. The question from Delegate Johnson, there are various for-profit training centers that take advantage of funds that have been made available in the past. For instance, these might be EARN recipients. So an EARN recipient might be a for-profit that actually works to develop apprentices in the space. That's an example. Another example is Baltimore Cyber Range, but a more specific example is Baltimore Cyber Range, who I believe is an EARN recipient who takes state funds and then it is technically a for-profit entity, but delivers trained workers within the cybersecurity space for the benefit of the state's industry. So we recognize that, and they are actually a for-profit entity as well. So it's important, and I believe that the Baltimore Cyber Range went to the Senate sponsor and discussed this with her. I see Brandon Engel, Chief of Staff for the Senate sponsor as well. He might be able to add some extra items as well.
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Lindsay, the amendments are different on each bill. Do they have to be moved separately?
And no, I mean, I think you can just conceptually vote on making the 2 bills identical. I'm just noting that the Senate adopted this amendment on the Senate cross file about the for-profit corporations. So we need to add that to the House bill as well, in addition to the original, the first piece of the amendments that I described, authorizing the governor to appropriate the funds. And then that clarification that the funding is used only subject to the availability of funding in the budget. That would go on both bills.
Any other discussion, questions, concerns on these amendments? Do I hear a motion on the amendments?
Move the amendments.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second on the amendments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to the amendments? The amendments have been adopted on the bills as amended. Do I hear a motion for?
Move the bills as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion on these amended bills? Okay, hearing none, I'll call for the vote. On the bills as favorable, on the bills as amended, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed to the favorable report on these 2 bills? Okay, thank you. They passed subcommittee unanimously. And let's move on to the final bill. Senate Bill 773. I think we heard this one last week. the Senator Lamb. Lindsay, remind us what this does?
Senate Bill 773 first note was not cross-filed and it passed the Senate 46-0. The bill requires the Board of Public Works by January 1st, 2024 to publish a model policy concerning the inclusion and use of liquidated damages provisions in procurement contracts, and each unit of state government, including a unit otherwise exempt from state procurement law, to adopt a written policy that is substantially similar to the model by July 1st, 2024. Each procurement unit must also maintain specified written documentation related to decisions not to include liquidated damage provisions in contracts or not to pursue damages in the event of a breach of contract. The sponsor offered amendments on the bill, which I circulated. The amendments require the board to consult with the Procurement Improvement Council on the model policy on liquidated damages. Rather than requiring documentation as to who approved a decision not to include a liquidated damages provision in a contract, the amendments require a unit to obtain the approval of the head of the unit if the unit decides not to include liquidated damages clause in contract. And for procurements that are $5 million or more, and when a unit decides not to pursue liquidated damages, requires a unit to maintain documentation. And rather than documenting who approved the decision not to pursue liquidated damages, it requires the unit to obtain the approval of the head of the unit. So there were provisions essentially that were trying to document who it was who approved. This is instead saying you have to get approval of the head of the unit. That makes sense.
Any discussion, questions, concerns on the amendments? Delegate Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking for, that confused me a little bit, Lindsay, on exactly how that's going to work. Can you break that down for us a little bit more?
So essentially, the unit has to obtain the approval of the head of the unit. So I was attempting to describe how the amendments contrast with the way the bill passed the Senate. So to forget what it said before, the bill would now require a unit to obtain the approval of the head of the unit if the unit decides not to include in a contract a liquidated damages clause, and only for procurements that are valued at $5 million or more, if a unit decides not to pursue liquidated damages when there is a breach that could get liquidated damages, they have to obtain the approval of the decision by the head of the unit, and they have to maintain documentation as to why they decided not to pursue liquidated damages.
Okay, that cleared it up. Thank you.
You recall that Senator Lamb gave us several examples of units that decided not to pursue liquidated damages. Delegate Shalega.
Thank you. There's some oppositional testimony in the bill file. Hold on, I clicked on the wrong place. Let me go back here. That say basically that the contracts, already include that and it's duplicative. Other folks that, were coming in, the architects, the Asphalt Association, the Maryland Transportation Builders and Materials Association. So was anything done to assuage their concerns?
I didn't see any opposition on the hearing witness list.
Was it sponsor only though?
I think what Delegate Shalega is referring to is the testimony that was offered on the Senate side on the original bill. And I think really what the Senate did is it made it just that the bill is only now requiring this guidance on when to include the liquidated damages and when to pursue liquidated damages provisions. And that was the means of addressing those concerns.
That's what I was asking. Thanks, Lindsay. So the amended bill is going to be guidance, not COMAR. We're just looking to them to give us guidance on how to continue or pursue these liquidated damages should it be necessary. Is that what happened?
Yes, that's right. And the other thing I'll add is the statement about it being duplicative is correct. A lot of contracts probably have liquidated damages provisions. I think the issue is that Senator Lamb raised is that units aren't necessarily enforcing those provisions.
Okay, so this bill is gonna ask the departments all departments or just general services to let us know what kind of guidance?
This is guidance for all units. So those would be units in the executive branch, and that includes instances when they're exempt from procurement law. And it's guidance on when to include liquidated damages, guidance for drafting liquidated damages provisions, a plan for responding to deficiencies in contractors' performance, and examples of when they can be used in contracts.
But
Alright,
this is
thank you.
for 5 million and above, correct?
The 5 million and above is with regard to the, if a unit decides not to pursue liquidated damages, they have to obtain the approval of the head of the unit and maintain documentation on why the unit decided not to pursue. And that's, the procurement is valued at $5 million or above, not that the liquidated damages would be 5 million or above.
Delegate Alston.
Thank you. So I was looking for the rewrite and I'm thinking, did you send this to us a couple of days ago? Because I don't see it on the floor system and I'm looking, I think I'm working off the
No,
wrong.
it wouldn't be in the floor system because this is a sponsor amendment that we received on the House side. So this is not incorporated into the third reader from the Senate.
Okay, did you email it to us?
I emailed the amendment on Friday, I believe. I can send it again.
Okay. All right, no, I can look for it. I just was trying to figure out where it was. Thank you. And if someone could answer what impact this will have on small businesses, I don't know if you all are able to answer that right now, but I would like to know.
Senator Lamb's office, do you have a response to that inquiry?
Yeah, I would just one thing I just wanted to flag is that if you look at the fiscal note, at least the fiscal note writers didn't feel that there was going to be a significant impact on small businesses. Additionally, like for most of these contracts that we're talking about, they're relatively larger. This may not actually implicate small businesses anyway, but just wanted to flag that the fiscal note writer did note that they did not expect a substantial small business impact from the bill.
Just to
Yes.
clarify, it actually does say potentially meaningful small business effect in the fiscal note. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I have the wrong fiscal note version in my file.
It says minimal.
You're good.
Yeah, I'm looking at a first reader fiscal note. I apologize. I have the wrong fiscal note in here.
It was very different as we first put it in, so that's fair.
Thank you.
Delegate Kipke?
Lindsay, when the pandemic happened, and pursuant to COVID and not COVID, Ukraine, diesel prices went through the roof. And there were some small family-owned businesses. We have another bill, Delegate Kaiser's, that were impacted by, they were locked into a contract that because of the cost of diesel, they were all suddenly, these companies were on the, headed towards bankruptcy by paying. So some of them pulled out of the contract, and this MT8 has the ability to go after them for liquidated damages, but it's in their discretion. I just want to make sure that their discretion would remain, and it sounds like it would, but I wanted to get a second, make sure you thought so as well.
Yeah, the bill right now is requiring just guidance on the liquidated damages provisions, and then these the amendments that I just referenced refer to if a unit's deciding not to pursue liquidated damages. They just have to get approval of the head of the unit and then document why they didn't do it. So
Where does the guidance come from?
that comes from BPW, and it's now with the amendments in consultation with the Procurement Improvement Council. So that guidance could say something like, if pursuit of liquidated damages would put them out of business or something like that, that could potentially be incorporated into that.
Yeah. Lizzie, these are committee amendments that have been accepted by the bill sponsor.
These did come from the bill sponsor, yes.
These are from the bill sponsor, okay?
Yep.
But they're not in the Senate version of the bill yet?
He did not offer them on the Senate side. I can't speak to why, but maybe Scott can. They might have just come up after the fact.
Yeah, after the fact, DGS had reached out and expressed some different, not different, but just some additive concerns to what they had originally brought up. And so we just tried to work with DJS to kind of iron those out. But by that point, it had already passed the Senate. So that's why they're new to you guys.
Any other discussion on the bill or the amendments? Is there a motion on the amendment?
Move favorable on the amendment.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed to the amendment? On the bill as amended? Okay, I have a motion and a second. Favorable motion on the bill as amended. All in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed? Delegate Chalega. You are,
I may
Lindsay?
vote for the bill when it comes to full committee. I just need to do a little more homework because, it also says in the testimony from a Legislative Service Office of Legislative Audits that it is worth noting presently Maryland Department of Health continues to disagree with that recommendation. So I'm going to do my homework, and like I said, I may vote for it when it comes to full committee.
all right. And do you want to be considered favorable or unfavorable?
Unfavorable, against the bill.
You're
For
against
the
bill at
amendments
this point.
against the bill.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have a reprint? I'd like to circulate it with a couple of people that I trust, just to make sure we're doing.
I can send it out to everybody.
Thank you.
I think I have it. All right, that completes our agenda today. All right, just checking the chat. There were some questions, but I think they've all been resolved at this point. Okay, that completes the work of the subcommittee for today, and I thank everyone for coming. And this concludes the Government Operations Health Facilities Work Session.